13. Yesterday you did your vocabulary definition, so if you haven't done those, they're late. You should get them completed and submitted today. Those of you that haven't completed your test from Module 8 on Islam, you're way behind, and you need to do that. It'll only be available today and tomorrow. So Module 13.1 is we're going to talk about a new area on Earth, and it's an area that you should be somewhat familiar with because we're going to talk about North America, which is the continent on which you live. And anytime we do a new area of the world, the first thing we have to talk about is geography. Now, how many of you guys are familiar with the geography of North America? Hey, hopefully everybody raises their hands, okay? But depending upon where you are on this continent, the geography is going to be pretty different. Do you think the geography of southern West Virginia is different than that of Kansas or Florida or Alaska or Arizona? They're all part of North America, but they all have very different geographies. So if we were to describe in one word the geography of North America, it would be diverse. You guys are so smart. It is very diverse. Diverse means different. So let's look up here where it's purple and blue and a little white. What's the what kind of geographic area can we characterize that as? All the way up here. Northern Canada, Alaska. What is that? Okay, well, it's cold here, but is that a geographical region? Cold? Arctic. Okay, it's a good one. I'm looking for what like the land is like. Can you do a lot of agriculture up there? What is it? Not that I'm aware of. How about tundra?
Oh, yeah.
Tundra. You can also refer to this as permafrost because it's permanently frozen. Permafrost. Not a lot of trees, not a lot of grass, not a lot of vegetation. It is an icy tundra. So the geography there is going to look a lot different than that of Florida, isn't it? Where it's basically like tropical rainforest. So it's very different. All right, so that's in northern Canada. What about where we live? What about this big area, this swath right through here? Definitely very mountainous. What else do we have? Okay, this geographic region is known as the Eastern Woodlands, dense forests. If it weren't for us humans, this whole area would be covered with trees. All of it would be covered with trees. So it's a very dense woodland. Okay? Now, the thing about also where we live is that we have, really the entire continent of North America has something that many other continents do not have. And that is a lot of river valleys. Lots and lots of rivers. Think about where we live right now. Name some rivers that you can be at within an hour of driving. Greenbrier, New River. You can only name 2 rivers. This is where you live, folks. No. Okay, the Potomac River does run through West Virginia in the eastern panhandle. The Kanawha River. The Guyandotte. Oh, yeah. The Elk River. The Ohio River, kind of close. We have lots and lots and lots of rivers and streams. And have you guys ever been on a riverbank, like in the summertime? Is it hard to walk around sometimes? Because it's lots of thick, green, lush vegetation. Because when those rivers levels rise and fall, it leaves behind that layer of like mud, and it's very rich in nutrients. And so fertile river valleys are abundant, not only where we live, but all throughout North America. All throughout North America. Okay? Another thing, when you look at this, you can see that we have a lot of coastlines. Look at how much coastline there is. How do you think having that much coastline is going to affect humanity or the way people live? Travel, absolutely. What else? When you travel to do, to make money, what's that called? Trade. You're going to do a lot of trade. All right. What other types of activities can the people do that have a lot of coastline? Fishing, absolutely. Shipping, fishing, all that's great. Okay, so we do have lots of coastlines, more than especially Europe, where we have been talking. Only certain countries have coastlines there. Okay, and if you think about it, where are the majority? Where do the majority of the population of our country today live? On the coastline, East Coast, West Coast. California is the largest state in our country. And then you got places like, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. These are heavily populated places. Massachusetts, okay? Then you got places like Wyoming and Colorado. There's a few people in Colorado. Montana. There's nobody living there. Even places like West Virginia. Nobody live here. It's like 3 million people, okay? New York City has like 11 million. There's like more people, like 5 times more people in New York City than there is in our entire state. Okay, so it's just to give you an idea of how small, how lightly populated our area is. Okay, another thing you have, it's very different. Tropical rainforest. You get down in here into the very southern part of North America, there are some dense rainforests, places in Mexico. Right? Very different down here than up here. Okay? Very, very different. Tropical rainforest, like a jungle. You guys understand that. We also have very hot, dry deserts out here in the American Southwest. Places like Eastern California, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Colorado, Utah, parts of those states. Very dry deserts. What's the driest, hottest place in North America? Anybody know what it is or where it's located? Good guess. Good guess.
One part in California.
It is one part in California. What's it called?
It's like that's not here.
Okay, that's in Africa.
Is that something
Ethan?
about
Death Valley. It has the lowest elevation. It's actually way beneath sea level, and it's the hottest, driest place in America. Okay, so very good. So, needless to say, we can definitely all agree that the geography of North America is diverse. All right. There are also some prominent features when we talk about North America. For example, it has a very large river. What is the largest river in North America? The Mississippi River. You can see its headwaters begin up here in Minnesota, and a lot of water drains into it. In fact, all of our rivers drain into it because all of our rivers flow to the Ohio, and the Ohio River flows into the Mississippi. So in essence, you could get on a boat on the Greenbrier and float all the way down to New Orleans and end up in the ocean. It would take you a long time, and it would be difficult to do, but in theory, you could do it. Okay? So, but this is the Mississippi River. It begins in Minnesota, and it drains out into the Gulf of Mexico at the city of New Orleans. Okay? New Orleans. In parts, it's very large. It's very deep. Very deep. It's a muddy river. And in parts of the Mississippi River Delta in Louisiana, it kind of splits out and creates a large, marshy, swampy type of area. Another prominent feature of North America is we have 2 major mountain chains. 2 major mountain chains. Can you guys name a mountain chain?
Yeah.
How about this one? Appalachian Mountains. You guys familiar with that? You just got to look out the window, and you are in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. West Virginia is the only state that is entirely located within the mountains. Mountains of Appalachia. Hence its nickname, the Mountain State. You guys have a pulse? Okay. All right. So, but as you can see, it's a large mountain chain flowing all the way from the south up into almost into New England. Large. They are very old mountains, and that's why they are eroded and rounded. Unlike a younger mountain chain, out west, the Rocky Mountains. As you can see why they're called that, as they are craggy and jagged and much less old. Not as much erosion has occurred yet. What causes mountains? How did these mountains get here? Just because we're mountain people? What? Tectonic plates. Okay, so I would imagine at one point in time this was a pretty earthquake-ridden place, as we are. That's what causes mountains to occur. All right, so maybe even some volcanoes. Who knows? Millions of years ago, what our geography was like. So, but two major mountain chains: Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian. All right. Now, as you all know, where did the first ever humans begin? Africa. So for a long, long time, there weren't even humans on our continent. How did they get here? How did humans? Who were the first Americans? Yeah, very good. As you can see, with this map of early migration, which is in your text, where humanity begins and it begins to spread, and eventually according to anthropologists and archaeologists, about 12,000 years ago, the first humans crossed from Asia into North America on the Bering Land Bridge, as it was during an ice age, and because so much of the seawater was contained in glaciers, it exposed a large area of land. And this land was known as the Bering Land Bridge. Today it's not there, because we're not in an ice age. Even though it's 6 degrees outside today, it feels like we're in an ice age. We're not. And a lot of this sea ice melted, which increases the level of the water and makes it, this now is a sea. But during this ice age, this was land, and people came across. What were they doing? Why did they come across? What kind of people were they? They were nomads. And so why did they come across? What were they following? Food, animals. They were looking for new sources of food. And so, over time, they began to spread out throughout North and South America. Okay, it takes a while. But eventually they settle and create their own cultures and civilizations. And that's what we're going to look at in Module 13. These different people, these first Americans. All right? So, over time, these people stopped being nomads, much like over time in Mesopotamia, people stopped being nomads and settled down and begin doing what? Well, if you no longer have to search around for food, what are you doing to get it? You're farming. Okay, so you begin to see the development of farming and agriculture. And they begin to do this around the year 7000 BC. 7000 BC. So like 9,000 years ago, right? People in central Mexico are the first to do large-scale agriculture in this hemisphere. They grow crops from seeds to sustain themselves. That doesn't sound like a big deal to us, but it was a massive undertaking in order for them to do that. And they grew different types of foods. They were growing grains and things like that in Europe and Asia. But there are different types of plants on this half of the world. Things like squash and gourds. You guys ever eaten zucchini or squash or had pumpkin pie? That's a gourd, okay? That's the types of things they had here. They didn't have squash and zucchini and gourds and even potatoes in the rest of the world. Those were all local. They're native to this half of the planet Earth, all right? So avocados, chilies, like habaneros and serrano, peppers, okay? Those are things that came from this half of the Earth. By far, the most important crop was this. What is this at the bottom right? Corn. There's also another word for corn, and it's called, starts with an M. A maize. It's amazing. Very good. Maize. M-A-I-Z-E. Maize. So, corn is like a superfood because it has a lot of carbohydrates in it. And for people,
Hunter Smith and Jacob Mala, report to the main office, please. Hunter Smith and Jacob Mala.
corn is a superfood. It has lots of carbohydrates in it, and carbohydrates are what gives you energy. And so if you don't have a very high protein-rich diet, you can get a lot of energy from carbohydrates, and that helps to make the population of the Americas grow quickly because people have a healthy diet. So corn was very important. And farmers became very productive in central Mexico. Is it warm there?
Yeah.
Super warm. They could harvest crops 3 times a year. You know how when we grow our little gardens in our backyard here in the mountains, we get tomatoes once a year? They could get them almost all year long, okay? So they could be very productive due to their geography. They even made these little floating gardens, like in swamps. They would like thatch together mud and dirt and like put it out in the swamp, and they wouldn't even have to water it because the roots would like go down into the swamp, and it would just be floating around, these little floating gardens. Pretty impressive. But as farming happens, it's going to bring some major changes to humanity. The use of agriculture changes people, changes the culture, and it changes people drastically. You remember we talked about how men and women were equal when they were nomads, but now who's doing the farming and who's responsible for all the food production? Nomads don't do farming. Men or women? Men. And as the men become fully responsible for food production, they become more important, well, in the eyes of the people, more important in terms of power. Okay? So the use of agriculture changes the culture of the people drastically. More food meant more population. If more people could eat and have healthy diets, the population is going to increase. That is a human fact. Okay? That's why our population increases so rapidly in well-developed countries, because there's a bounty of food. So farmers began to be able to grow more than they needed, and not everybody living in a community had to be a farmer. Like 10 farmers could grow enough food for 100 people. So that means there's 90 other types of people that can do something different. And so you begin to see different types of specialized jobs emerge. Tradesmen, craftsmen, artisans. People began making jewelry, making weapons, doing anything, building houses. People could do other types of things and be specialized at it, be good at it, because they didn't have to spend all their time farming. And they could take their efforts and trade their labor or their efforts for money, or just in a barter system for the food that they needed. In doing this, it creates social classes, meaning there are rich people and there are poor people. Before agriculture, before people began to do specialized labor, there was no such thing as like poverty. Everybody was pretty much the same. But with the advent of social classes, there are rich people and poor people, people who are in charge, people who do what the person in charge says, ruler and subject. So it created a very complex culture. And this complex culture obviously is going to breed argument, conflict, and people are going to split from one another and create other civilizations. And you can see here, look at all, just in this one little figure, all the different types of tribes and civilizations that emerged all over, okay? So, I know like where we were, we had the Hopewell, we had, that was one tribe, we had mound builders, Cherokee, there was lots of different tribes over the years where we were, just as it was all over North America and Central and South America. Okay? So a good overview of how early Americans get started. This particular module is going to have 4 lessons. The textbook has 5. I'm going to combine the last 2 into one, okay, because I want to do that. So, but, as long as you're following along on your folders on Schoology, you'll be good. As I told you earlier, if we have a remote day tomorrow, your assignment is to do your journal entry and the 13.1 activities that are already in the folder. Okay, so do you guys have any questions on early Americans or the geography of North America? All right, cool. I hope you learned something today.